So what do you say to the people who are just like, if you don't like your job, then quit, go get a different job?
It's not so easy. And in this day and age where information's out there and there's LinkedIn and all of these other methods of finding out where you were, people talk, and that's why people stay where they are. That's why they deal with the misery of their workplace, and they come home and then they let it all out on their family, their friends. Even in noble professions such as medicine, I can think back at times where I saw workplace hostility, where I saw people trembling entering the operating room, dreading working with a certain surgeon or doctor, and sometimes people just quit.
Dr. Judith, I've never heard of this. Why have I never heard of workplace PTSD?
So this is a little touchy because you don't want to take away from people who've actually had life-threatening situations or experiences, or who witnessed them happen to someone that they know or that they love. I think it's so important to talk about how people can experience PTSD-like symptoms because of workplace trauma. And I'm not talking about people who get physically hurt at work or almost die at work or something like that. I'm talking about when your livelihood, your ability to make money, to provide for yourself and your family, when that is threatened. And I think that if you think about workplace PTSD that way, it's more common than you think. And here's why. Whenever you have a situation where someone's in power, a position of power, so it could be a coworker, it could be your boss, when someone can threaten you and kind of force you or use their power to make you do something and then say that if you don't do it, you're gonna lose your job, then you're looking at losing your livelihood, your ability to provide for your family, for yourself. And that very threat of someone taking away your livelihood can cause someone to experience PTSD-like symptoms. And that's where I think it's an undiscovered area, and it's one where I am really pioneering the research in. Workplace PTSD, how can experiences at work that threaten your livelihood lead you to have PTSD-like symptoms?
Isn't that every job everywhere though?
It's not. And just like with the typical PTSD that we study, there are certain levels of intensity in terms of the trauma that you experience at work. So in some cases, I have seen people physically shaking walking into their workplace because they don't know if this is the day that this person who's in power will say, go home, clean out your desk, because they have been harassed to a point where every day they wonder, is this my last day at work? How am I going to find a job? And if they say anything, people will say, well, everybody hates their job. You're supposed to hate your boss. You're supposed to hate your coworkers.
Yeah, there's no validation.
Yeah, there's no validation. People feel foolish complaining about workplace hostility. And also sometimes when you go to the HR department, you're setting yourself up for this big unknown. What if this ends up on my resume that I'm a whistleblower and I can't find work? So I think people tend to not talk about it, and there's not that validity. And I think it's an area that people really need to start exploring because it affects way more people than we realize.
I hear people saying, watching this, just get over it. Yeah, you don't like your job, you might get fired. We all might get fired. But how is that different than discrediting anyone else who has PTSD?
It's different because, I mean, look at the Me Too movement and how all of these people are speaking up about how they were threatened. If they didn't do X, they would lose this position. They'd never work again. These are people who were in a vulnerable position, being threatened by someone in power, and they were going to lose their livelihood. What choice did they have? And so when you have someone who's in a corner and they can lose their ability to basically exist, that is traumatizing, and it's valid to give credence to their concerns, to their symptoms.
So how did you first discover this new environment for PTSD?
Well, I'm fortunate. I live in a very busy city and I work in a very busy city. And that gives me access to patients and relationships that, where I am able to see these symptoms of workplace PTSD manifest. And what I would say is there is strength in numbers. Don't stay silent. I think this is a silent epidemic, and I think that it's going to get more attention. They're not going anywhere. These people are complaining and they're angry, and they should be. And I think that there's strength in numbers. So when you see this happening, talk about it. Break that silence. Ask for help.
Where?
Within your workplace. So if it's happening to you, it's most likely happening to someone else there. So what I found is that with the people that I work with, when they talk about it with their colleagues, it gives them validity, it gives them more power, more reassurance. You can't fire everyone, right? So when you have a group saying that this is happening to all of us, or if you have someone saying, I've witnessed this happen to this person, there's a sense of empowerment. You can do something about it. Whereas if you feel you're alone and you're going to be discredited, you're not going to say anything.
What about from the management standpoint? Management, bosses, CEOs, what can they do?
So, recently New York State changed their laws. So I can speak from a local level that you have to have harassment policies in place. Everyone by the end of 2018 has to be trained as to how to report harassment because it's a thing. This is a real thing that's happening. People are angry. They're tired of having no one listen to them. And so this is why I think that this topic is so important, that there are now avenues and laws that protect you where you have to have a way to report harassment and hostility, or else the company can be fined. And so now the law is on your side, whereas before I don't think it was.
What about the people who just say, our society is getting weaker. Nobody can even handle a boss yelling at them anymore without yelling PTSD.
That too, I think we should talk about, because there are difficult bosses, there are difficult personalities, and the same goes for classic trauma. There are more, some people will say like, oh, I'm so traumatized, I almost fell onto the train tracks, when they didn't, like someone shoved them and so forth. So there is that element of, okay, is this really a thing? Still, don't distract from the people who are actually suffering, who have these physiological symptoms, who can't sleep at night, the classic symptoms of PTSD, who refuse to go to work or like take sick days because they just need a break. Their system can't tolerate the amount of anxiety that they experience when they walk through that door, who are having flashbacks and nightmares of things at work that really do threaten their livelihood, their existence. So there is that clear demarcation. Again, we have to treat it like everything else. It should be diagnosed. And I think that there is a need to have this criteria.
Well, not only that, but the amount of productivity that's lost in the US each year from people maybe being at work but not being efficient at work because they're dealing with a mental illness like depression or PTSD is $200 billion with a B dollars a year.
Yeah.
So to create work environments where people aren't in fear, where they feel welcome, where they feel like there is an outlet to seek help if they need it, you actually run a more effective, a more efficient company and save that 15% of productivity. Our founder at MedCircle, Doug Colbeth, is a huge proponent of that. If tomorrow I said, Doug, I need a mental health day, he wouldn't even question it. He would just say, oh my gosh, take it, of course. Because he understands that when I come back the next day, I'm actually going to be productive.
This is an instance where I think that the kids are the leaders in this. So like with all the anti-bullying and the importance of having safe and supportive environment, safe spaces in schools, and kids feel safe to have a voice when something is happening to them, when someone is threatening them or bullying them. I think that in this case, the kids let us, because workplaces are now mirroring what the schools are doing. So there is a validity to this. Everyone remembers the bully and they can talk openly about it because it's so far removed, but people don't talk about what happens at work.
Yes. You're also a mother to a 2-year-old. How optimistic are you about the world that she's being raised in and at the world that she's going to go and work in?
So I like to focus on the positives, right?
Okay.
I cannot protect her from the world. However, I can celebrate her strengths. I can encourage her. I can focus on the positives in her character and her attributes and put all my investments there. Because I'm fortunate in that I don't have a special needs child. However, when I work with special needs children or kids who have emotional distress and so forth, rather than just focusing on all the negative, all we do is talk about like the depression, the anxiety. Let's also focus on the things that are great. And let's put as many resources into those areas.
Yes.
Because that's how you build resilience.
Yes.
So I know that I can't protect Zara from everything out there, but I do know that she will always feel loved. She will feel safe. She can always come to me. And she will be celebrated. And I think that will help her no matter what she faces in life.
And that's in your control too.
It is.
You know, I think a lot of people stress themselves out because they can't control everything. And surrendering to that lack of control and then focusing on what you can actually do is such a healthy move. Or at least I think so. Now, you're a researcher in workplace PTSD. What are some of the things that you found thus far?
What I've found is that there's an incredible amount of shame, the same type of shame that you find with other types of trauma. And this is why I think that I'm onto something here. I think that people need to feel like there is a label. And we talked about labels before and how sometimes we like them, we don't. In this case, you really need to validate this with a label. And so that does two things. It provides this standardized type of method for diagnosing, and also it helps us to find the right treatments.
Which is the whole point.
Yes.
The whole point of getting that label is to get the right treatment. So what will treatment, I know it's early, but what type of treatment do you think will come with treating workplace PTSD?
So I think very similar to the treatments that are there for the classic types of PTSD.
Okay.
So someone has to feel safe. They have to feel validated. They can't be dismissed. And also just to ameliorate some of the symptoms that they're feeling, like the lack of sleep, the anxiety, the constant tension, the stress management, all of the similar things that we see with PTSD. Remember, not too long ago, people associated PTSD with combat only, military. And people who were being abused and molested, well, I mean, get over it. It happened a while ago. Things happen. But now we're learning that PTSD is more common in these non-veteran populations, civilian populations. So this area continues to evolve and surprise us, and I'm really excited about what's ahead.
You're writing a book on this, workplace PTSD. Is there a title yet? Is there a working title?
We've had a couple.
Okay.
So initially we were thinking horrible bosses and then workplace PTSD, but then we were like, no, because a lot of the cases that we work with, they're not bosses, they're coworkers.
Yes.
People are getting harassed laterally.
Yeah.
Sometimes even
in my case, it's the coworker. I'm just kidding. I love everyone here. Okay.
So we're still working on it, but one of the things that I like is the gut check, and how you know in your gut when something is off, and follow your gut because it is there to protect you.
Yes.
It does not lie, and it tells you when you need help.
Yeah. I believe in that.
Yeah.
I had a job where I would psych myself up the whole drive there. Today's gonna be different. You're gonna do great. Da da da. And as soon as I opened that door and walked in, it was like every part of my body just left with the wind. And I was just a shell of a person living in this desolate, isolated desert of doom. That's how much I hated being there. And so I understand. And that was more than a guttural reaction. Eventually I just psychology and learning about mental health and want to learn more while meeting other people who are interested. Explore your membership options using the link below this video or visit medcircle.com. So what do you say to the people who are just like, if you don't like your job, then quit, go get a different job?
It's not so easy. And you know, in this day and age where information's out there and there's LinkedIn and all of these other methods of finding out where you were, people talk, and that's why people stay where they are. That's why they deal with the misery of the workplace, and they come home and then they let it all out on their family, their friends. So this is a real thing. And people ask me all the time, are there certain industries where this happens more than others? I don't think it discriminates. Just like PTSD does not discriminate, it's across the board. Wherever there's a position of power and someone can abuse it, there's a potential for other people to suffer. And so, I think back to my medical school days, even in noble professions such as medicine, I can think back at times where I saw workplace hostility, where I saw people trembling entering the operating room, dreading working with a certain surgeon or doctor. And sometimes people just quit. They were like, you know what, forget medicine. And so I know this is a real thing. I know that there are people who experience this all across the board, no matter what profession, and we need to talk about it.
I know, but I just hear people saying, well, then that person who was too afraid to work with that surgeon, that's why the surgeon treats them like that, because if you can't handle working with me, maybe you shouldn't be in the operating room.
Blaming the person who is being abused.
Yes. Yeah. What's your response to that?
This is what we see with sexual abuse. Why did you wear that outfit? What were you doing?
Why did you go there?
Yep.
Yeah, are you familiar, have you heard of the just world theory?
Yes.
Yes. The just world theory, explain what the just world theory is.
So sometimes it's just too overwhelming to believe that the world is a bad place and bad things can happen. So it's easier to just say, well, if you didn't do this, this wouldn't have happened. And it's denial, it's strong, it's human. And it's not that the person wants to blame the victim, it's not that they're doing it consciously, it's just sometimes too overwhelming to think that the world could be that scary.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why
So there's got to be a reason this happened to you, because it can't happen to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just it's terrifying to think that, your child can grow up, go to school, graduate, have a job, and then be persecuted at their job.
Persecuted, right.
So there must be something you're doing, and I hear this all the time in my office. My mom says you just have to approach it that way and this way, and these are adults, and they're getting advice from their parents still because they're like, I can't deal with this job.
Yeah.
How did I end up here? It's not what you did. Someone is taking advantage of their powerful position, and you're suffering because of it.
Yeah.
And that person needs to change. That person needs to be removed, not you.
How does workplace anxiety differ from workplace PTSD?
That's a great question. So the hallmarks of PTSD are what we talked about earlier: the avoidance, the hypervigilance, the thought distortions, and just that irritability. So those are the hallmarks of PTSD. You have to meet the criteria. Whereas just like with anxiety and people experiencing trauma and then having just anxiety versus PTSD, you don't have all of those symptoms. And so I don't think that the diagnosis of PTSD will stray. However, the trigger will be different. So in this case, your life is not necessarily threatened, but your livelihood is threatened. So someone who has a nightmare, let's say if they survived a horrific accident, they may have nightmares about that terrible accident, the details of it. They may wake up smelling like what the burning of a fire or so forth. Whereas someone who has workplace PTSD, they're going to have nightmares about losing their job, being without a home, not having the basic needs to care for their children. So the basic principles are the same, but the details will be different because they're based on the trigger.
And if this goes undiagnosed, what are the consequences for that person and the company?
Productivity. I mean, that's in the end costs, right? It costs a lot for someone to go on medical leave.
Yes.
And then the person who's going through this may not be able to work again if it's so intense, if they're not getting the supports that they need. They may spiral into a depression. They may pick up another habit, a substance abuse problem. So things get worse the longer that they go on without treatment and support. We know that. So I don't think it'll be very different than other types of PTSD.
When it gets treated, though, what type of improvement do you see?
Again, functioning.
Yes.
So
Function.
At home, your relationships improve. You're able to enter the workplace, to feel that you have skills again. Your self-esteem improves. And those other things that happen, the depression, the anxiety, that gets better too. So I don't think that many things will be different with regards to workplace PTSD, but I do think the trigger is different.
And for the people watching this who might be self-diagnosing incorrectly or correctly that they have workplace PTSD, they go see their therapist or psychiatrist. They've never heard of this.
I've never heard of it.
So how do they bring this up to their therapist?
Unless it's researched and studied and it has a name, a label, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that we need to name it. We need to understand it.
So what can they do in the meantime?
They can address some of the symptoms: the lack of sleep, the anxiety, the feeling like no one understands them. Therapy is powerful in that way. Someone listens, they empathize, and they give you tools to manage your stress. So I think that there's still a power in going to therapy, even if this condition doesn't have an official diagnosis.
I use my MedCircle account in conjunction with seeing my regular therapist. And there have been times where I've taken, and it's kind of weird because I'm conducting the interview, but I've taken an interview I've conducted to my therapist and go, now, but what about this though? And so I think it would be totally appropriate for a patient to show them, a therapist, this video, and congratulations therapist if you're watching this, because that means they're open to that idea of learning. because that might be able to help them in their treatment as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are your top 3 self-help strategies someone can implement today to cope or manage with workplace PTSD?
Talk about it. For people that I work with, they've been silent for so long, and there's a shame. And there's a relief when they share their story with someone who's trusted. It could be a coworker, it could be a friend, and they talk about it. And rather than staying silent, there's just this catharsis that happens when you share.
Yes.
That's number 1. Number 2, always see a mental health specialist. Because even if they don't know what you're talking about, they've never heard of it, like I said before, they can help you with some of the symptoms that you're suffering with. Number 3, don't blame yourself. Like there's this thing that happens with people who take advantage of others. It's called gaslighting, where they're doing the thing that they're accusing you of doing, and then you're just left in this state of confusion. So that's where the gut check comes in. I earned this job. I'm here for a reason. I can do this. Why is this person making me feel like I am inadequate, that I'm going to lose my position? When I wouldn't be here if that were the case, right?
Yeah.
So
that's good.
Again, that therapy helps you with that because it's an outside perspective that helps to reaffirm your initial beliefs before all of this abuse started to happen.
Fascinating discussion. I'm glad that we've dedicated an episode to this. People will really start to observe themselves and the ones they loved with a new lens, I think, after hearing all this.
I have to tell you, when I started speaking about this on my social media platforms, this is the area that got the most attention. People are like, this has happened to me. I know someone, and I was shocked. And I'm like, this is totally a thing. We need to explore it.
This is a thing. We need to explore it. Yeah.